Welcome to the Truth Wins podcast. This is episode 90 called Should Christians Be Pacifists? My name is Todd Sherman. I'm your host as always. With me is my good friend Stu. Say hey, Stu.
Hey, Stu.
We should probably define pacifist, though, because some people might say, I don't know what that even means. What's a pacifist?
It's like the ocean was called the Pacific Ocean because it seemed really peaceful compared to the Atlantic when Balboa saw it for the first time.
Dude, are you serious?
I'm serious.
I love it.
So,
you got all these like
weird little
Jeopardy trivia
things.
answers just coming out everywhere.
Read them in the back of cereal boxes mostly, so they're all very well researched.
Back in the day. All right. Yeah. So peaceful as in, and so pacifist means?
Doing nothing, basically. If somebody ever comes against you, you turn the other cheek all the time and don't protect your wife and children.
No war, no
war.
No, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the big idea is or should all Christians be pacifists? If we're in line with Scripture, should they be pacifists? Because certainly there are many who believe that I know and love and respect. But we're going to dive into Scripture and say, well, what does Scripture say on
this? And
it's
a more complex thing than we're defining it as right here, because pacifism, there can be very brave pacifists.
For sure.
I mean, and so I kind of besmirched their reputation. So
you did.
Apologize.
You just like slapped them right out of the gate. Let's just ease into it here a little bit and not be macho. Okay. Let's not be toxic.
Because there were some great passive individuals. I mean, Gandhi started with his, not resisting the British, and also you had Martin Luther King Jr. and a lot of great men who chose to do a peaceful means of protest.
Yep.
So we're not gonna attack them, but what we're gonna attack is something else.
Do we have to attack?
I
know we're talking about peace and war, but we don't have to attack anybody.
We're examining it.
All right. Well, let's just take a step back, rethink it for a second, and while we do that, we're going to do what we call Time to Stump Stu. I like how you always roll your eyes because it's like, oh, this is so painful, but you have to love it because you were a speech and debate guy, right?
No, actually, I just taught a lot.
But did you teach speech and debate?
I am right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Well, there we go. Case in point. And so when people have a comment or a question, it's good to say, okay, what do they really mean? Or is this a logical fallacy? Or what does he mean by that? So that's kind of what this time is, because we have people who go on Facebook and different social media that we're on and have their comments, and we welcome those comments. And if Stu gets a little
feisty,
snarky in his response sometimes, that's just who he is, but it's okay. We're not trying to bust on you as much as...
I don't know. I think Todd may have a corner on the snarky.
No, I definitely pot calling kettle back there. But let's go into today's, and I set the table because today's got a lot of different things you could shoot back at. But William said, the Bible was written by and for men of the Eastern culture for their local God. It would seem as the echoes of previous books was edited at the will of those in power at the time of each translation, a mashup of early works. Plus the work of good King James, a shady fella with an axe to grind and a Bible to rewrite. God exists and is alive and well despite the black book.
All right.
What say you?
I would say, William, you got one part of that right. God exists and is alive and well. So
you're finding common ground. So that's a speech and debate thing.
Yeah.
Find a common ground and then dismantle it. Okay.
And the problem with William's premise here is that he has probably read the Da Vinci Code, which seemed to illustrate this idea that the Bible was never put together until the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, and that it was basically the result of back history, like rewriting history after it had already happened. And one of the things we're going to find when we do some of our episodes today is that the Bible is actually a very objective historical piece, because it actually talks about the flaws of the people who write it. Mm-hmm. Most books don't, and especially most philosophical books don't talk about the flaws of the originator of those philosophies.
Yep. Anything else?
Yeah, I would say go to our episode on Can You Trust the Bible? We talk a lot about how we got the canon of Scripture. And the word canon is a Greek word for measuring stick. Mm-hmm. And the early church had already canonized and basically put into practice. You could rewrite the entire New Testament from just the writings of the early church fathers to each other. You could put it back together from the quotes that they had in their works. You know, Tertullian and all those guys from the early times.
Yeah. Yeah, I would encourage you to, and I know a lot of people do this. I do this myself. Sometimes I'll comment before actually listening or reading things. I try not to ever do that, but guilty as charged. So especially if you're commenting on these, but you haven't listened, go back and listen to Can You Trust the Bible and Others? Because we try to lay everything out in a good argument of saying, here's what Scripture says, here's what history says, here's what philosophy says, whatever the topic is. There's not just us saying, well, we believe it and that's the end of it. It's like, yeah, there's an argument there. So I'd really encourage you, William, to go to that and others that might address some of your thoughts here about the Bible just being old boys club putting together a book.
And it's not, because you can go, there's a couple of good books about this too. You can do Evidence That Demands a Verdict, Josh McDowell, and then his son Sean, a newer version. But also there's a book called The Story of the Bible, and it has a lot of the artifacts and things we've discovered, because the Bible has more manuscript evidence for it than any other book from antiquity. It's not even close. And the shortest gap between when it was written and the earliest copies. So it's the most trustworthy of any of the books by far.
Yep. Cool. Well, that is today's Time to Stump Stu.